never thought I'd be disowned by my own family, but all it took was one lie. One false accusation that shattered everything I had known about trust, love, and family. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how my life fell apart because of a lie that I never saw coming, one that came from my own sister. I grew up in a tight-knit family. My parents, though not wealthy, always made sure that my sister, Lily, and I had everything we needed. My dad worked long hours in construction, while my mom stayed home to care for us. They taught us the value of hard work, honesty, and kindness. Principles I've always tried to live by. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it was one full of love and support. Lily and I were close, especially when we were younger. We'd spend hours playing together in our small backyard, pretending we were princesses or adventurers in a world of our own making. As we grew older, our paths began to diverge. Lily was always the popular one, loud, confident, and the life of every party. I was more introverted, content to stay home with a book or hang out with a few close friends. But despite our differences, we had always looked out for each other. I remember when I first introduced Mark to Lily. I was nervous. Lily had a way of being protective of me, sometimes a bit too much. She'd always been the one to give unsolicited advice, to tell me what I should or shouldn't do. But Mark was different. He wasn't intimidated by her confidence, and he made me feel like I could be myself without any judgment. At first, Lily seemed fine with our relationship. She'd ask about Mark every now and then, making small talk when he came over for family dinners. But something shifted after we'd been together for a few months. It wasn't dramatic at first, just little things. She'd make offhand comments about how Mark wasn't good enough for me or how I could do better. At first, I shrugged it off as her being protective, but it started to gnaw at me. She'd always been the center of attention, and now that I had Mark, someone who made me feel special, I wondered if it bothered her. But despite the subtle tension, life went on. Mark and I became more serious about our relationship. We spent weekends exploring the city, taking long drives, and talking about everything: our dreams, our fears, and even our futures. For the first time, I felt like I was building something real with someone. When Mark proposed to me, it was everything I had ever imagined. A quiet, intimate dinner. Just the two of us, followed by him getting down on one knee and asking me to be his forever. I said yes without hesitation, the excitement and love I felt for him overwhelming everything else. But things started to change after that. Lily began pulling away. She stopped showing up to our family dinners, stopped calling, and started distancing herself from me. I didn't understand at first. I thought maybe it was just that she was busy with her own life. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As I prepared for my wedding, it became clear just how much her behavior had shifted. She no longer offered her usual advice or helped with the plans like I'd expected. Instead, she would make sarcastic remarks and act distant whenever I mentioned Mark. I tried to brush it off. After all, she was my sister, and I knew we could work through whatever this was. But I didn't know then what I know now. Things weren't just changing, they were falling apart, and I had no idea why. I should have seen the signs earlier, but I didn't. Maybe if I had, I could have avoided what came next. But I didn't, and that's when everything started to unravel. It started with a simple text message, one that would change the course of my life forever. It was a Wednesday night when I got home from work. The streets were empty, the quiet hum of the city settling in as I unlocked the door to our apartment. Mark was sitting on the couch, his eyes red-rimmed, his face pale. His hands were shaking as he held his phone in front of him, looking at something I couldn't see. His demeanor was completely different from the usual calm, collected person. I knew. There was a deep sense of panic in his eyes, something I hadn't seen before. "Mark, what's wrong?" I asked, my voice trembling as I stepped closer to him. "What happened?" He didn't answer immediately. His eyes flickered from his phone to me, then back to the screen, as if he couldn't quite process what he was seeing. I felt a chill run down my spine as the silence stretched on. This wasn't like him. He was always the one to comfort me, to tell me everything would be okay. But now, he looked broken. "Sarah," Mark stuttered, his voice cracking. He couldn't seem to find the right words, and it only made me feel more on edge. My heart was racing. What could have possibly upset him so much? Finally, he handed me his phone, and that's when I saw it the message that would shatter everything. It was from Lily. "Mark, I need to tell you something. I know it's hard to believe, but Sarah isn't who you think she is. She's been hiding something from you. Something terrible. She's been abusing me, and you need to know the truth." I stared at the screen, blinking, as if I could somehow make sense of the words. My brain couldn't process it. Abuse? My sister was accusing me of abuse? The very same sister I had spent my entire life with. The one who had been my confidant. My partner in crime. It didn't make sense. Mark was looking at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and fear. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah, is this true?" I felt my stomach drop, and I could feel the world spinning around me. "No," I said, almost pleading. "This is insane. Mark, you know me. You know I would never hurt Lily. You have to believe me." But the doubt in his eyes was already there, planted by Lily's message. He didn't respond immediately, his silence louder than any words he could have spoken. I tried to explain, to tell him how ridiculous the accusation was. But every time I spoke, the words just seemed to fall flat. I could see him slipping away, a distance growing between us that I couldn't bridge. The next few days were a blur of confusion and heartbreak. Mark barely spoke to me. When he did, it was like he was afraid to look me in the eye, as though seeing me was a reminder of the accusations that Lily had planted in his mind. I called Lily over and over again, demanding an explanation, but she never picked up. Each time, it felt like a dagger to the heart, knowing that the one person I had trusted with my life, my sister, was the one who had torn my world apart. I tried to reach out to her, but she wouldn't respond to my messages. Her silence spoke volumes. It was as if she had made her decision, and nothing I could say or do would change it. Eventually, Lily answered one of my calls. Her voice was cold, distant, and utterly unrecognizable. "I had to do it. Sarah," she said, her words like ice. "You were never going to change. I had to stop you before you hurt anyone else." I was stunned. "What are you talking about? I've never hurt you. Why would you say something like that?" She didn't even hesitate. "You've been abusive for years. I'm the only one who knows the truth. Mark needs to know what you really are." I was speechless. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of the madness that was unfolding. Lily had always been a little dramatic, but this was something entirely different. She was lying. She had to be. But no matter how many times I tried to convince her, she didn't budge. When she hung up, I collapsed onto the couch, my hands trembling, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Everything that I had worked for, everything I had built with Mark, was slipping through my fingers. How could my sister, of all people, do this to me? The fallout from Lily's accusation didn't take long to spread. The whispers started almost immediately, and Mark, who had once been my biggest supporter, now avoided me like the plague. The people I'd known for years at work suddenly started to give me strange looks. People who had been my friends distanced themselves. I was becoming a pariah, and I couldn't stop it. I had no control over the situation, and the worst part was, no one cared to listen to my side of the story. Mark and I barely spoke. He couldn't bring himself to look at me the same way. Every time I tried to explain myself, to tell him that The accusations were lies. He just looked away, as if hearing my voice was a reminder of the betrayal that had been planted in his mind. "I don't know who you are anymore, Sarah," he said one night, his voice broken. "I thought I knew you, but now I don't know if I can trust you." And with those words, everything I had worked for was gone. The love I had fought for, the relationship I had built, all of it shattered in an instant. Lily's lies had torn us apart, and nothing I could do would ever put the pieces back together. The woman I had once called my sister had destroyed my life with a single lie. And Mark, the person I thought I'd spend my life with, now looked at me with suspicion, as if I was the one who had betrayed him. The next few weeks felt like I was living in a nightmare. Every morning I woke up with a sense of dread, knowing that things had changed irreparably. I could feel the distance between Mark and me growing, like an invisible wall was being built between us. Every word I spoke, every gesture I made, seemed to push him further away. He wouldn't look at me the same way anymore. It was like I had become a stranger in my own home, a person he no longer knew. It wasn't just Mark who was pulling away. The fallout from Lily's lies was spreading like wildfire. People I had known for years at work started acting differently around me. I could feel their eyes on me, watching me as if I was some sort of monster. At first, it was just whispers behind my back, but soon, it became too obvious to ignore. My colleagues would avoid making eye contact, and when they did speak to me, it was cold, distant. It felt as though I had become radioactive no one wanted to be near me for fear that the same accusations would rub off on them. I was being judged for something I hadn't done, and no one seemed to care about the truth. The worst part was that even my friends, the ones who had known me for years, started distancing themselves. People I'd trusted with my deepest thoughts, my happiest moments, were now turning their backs on me. I'd send messages, trying to explain myself, but they never replied. No one asked for my side of the story. I was being painted as a villain based on the words of one person, my sister. And then came my parents. I didn't know how to approach them. My father had always been my biggest supporter, a man who had stood by me through thick and thin. But when I told him what was happening, he just looked at me, his face filled with doubt. "Sarah, what's going on?" he asked, his voice unusually sharp. "Your sister says things, terrible things. How do you expect us to just ignore them?" I could see the hurt in his eyes, the confusion. He was torn. He wanted to believe me. But how could he win all? He had were Lily's accusations, so carefully constructed and so believable. "She's lying, Dad," I cried, feeling desperate. "I would never hurt her. You have to believe me. You know me, but it wasn't that simple." My mother, who had always been the glue holding our family together, said nothing. She just stood there, silent, her face pale and unreadable. "She's just trying to get attention, Mom. I don't know what's gotten into her," I pleaded, my voice breaking. "Please don't let her tear this family apart. I need you to trust me." But the silence that followed was deafening. They didn't trust me anymore. The doubts had taken root, and there was no way to pull them out. They had seen the messages from Lily. They had heard her version of events, and despite knowing me their whole lives, the lies were more powerful than the truth. It wasn't just my family. The rumors spread through the entire town. I would walk down the street and feel eyes on me, people whispering behind my back, judging me for something I hadn't done. I used to be able to walk down these very streets with confidence, knowing that the people around me cared for me. But now, I was treated like a pariah. I was the girl accused of abuse, and no matter how many times I told my side, no one would believe me. As days passed, Mark became more distant, his silence more painful than any argument we could have had. I tried everything to get through to him: long talks, tearful apologies, explanations, but nothing worked. He would listen, but it was clear he didn't believe me. The doubt had settled into his heart, and there was no room left for trust. One evening, after another failed attempt to reach him, Mark said the words that broke me completely. "I need space. Sarah, I can't be with someone I'm not sure about. You've done something to me that I can't just forget." I was shattered. My heart felt like it had been torn from my chest, but I didn't know how to fix it. I begged him to believe me, to understand that Lily was lying, but instead, he just walked away. His footsteps echoed in the silence of the apartment, and I was left alone with the wreckage of my life. And the worst part? Lily never once reached out to apologize. She never asked how I was coping with the destruction she had caused. She continued on with her life unscathed, while I was left picking up the pieces of everything I had lost. I tried to contact her again, to ask why she did this, to understand what I had done to deserve this kind of betrayal, but there was no answer. She had cut me off completely. It was as though I had never existed in her life. All those years of memories, of shared laughter, of sisterhood, none of it mattered anymore. It had all been wiped away by a lie. I had always believed that family was everything, that no matter what happened, blood would always be thicker than water. But now, I saw the truth for what it was sometimes. The people you love the most can be the ones who hurt you the most. And Lily, my own sister, had proven that in the worst possible way. The fallout from those lies was more than I could ever have imagined. Mark was gone. My family was fractured. My friends were no more. I was left in a world where I no longer recognized myself. A world where I was constantly defending myself against accusations that weren't even true. And the pain of it all, it never really went away. It lingered in the quiet moments, in the spaces where love once lived, and it haunted me. But I couldn't let it destroy me. I had to find a way to rebuild. I had to survive. Time passed, but it didn't heal the wounds. In fact, the pain only seemed to grow with each day. I woke up every morning feeling like I was drowning in a sea of memories of Mark, of my family, of a life that now felt like it belonged to someone else. My heart was broken, but my mind was shattered, caught in an endless loop of questions that would never be answered. Why had Lily done this to me? How could she have destroyed everything with one malicious lie? The emptiness inside me was unbearable. I couldn't focus at work. I couldn't concentrate on anything. I would stare at the blank screen of my computer, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on my chest. It felt as though the walls were closing in, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape. But then came the realization, I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep punishing myself for something I didn't do. I had to find a way to move on. The only way to survive this was to rebuild my life, step by painful step. I started by cutting ties with Lily. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, but I knew it was the only choice I had left. I had spent years trying to protect our bond, trying to maintain the relationship we had, but I had to face the brutal truth. Someone who could destroy my life so easily wasn't someone I needed in my world. The first few weeks after I cut her out of my life were agony. There was a constant ache in my chest, a longing for the sister I thought I knew. But every time I thought about reaching out, every time I thought about trying to mend things, I remembered the lies, the betrayal, the destruction, and I knew that I couldn't go back. Mark, too, had become a distant memory. After all the pain, all the rejection, I realized that I couldn't keep waiting for him to change his mind. I couldn't keep hoping that the man I had loved would come back to me. His silence had cut deeper than anything Lily had done. I had tried to explain, tried to make him see that I was innocent, but the damage was done. I had to let go, even though it felt like a part of me was dying with each passing day. I focused on rebuilding my life. I started therapy. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I needed someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't judge me, someone who could help me untangle the mess in my mind. Slowly, I began to understand the pain I had been carrying. The guilt, the shame, the anger. It was all a result of being caught in a storm that wasn't of my making. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could change how I dealt with it. As I worked through the emotional wreckage, I also started to focus on myself. I began to reconnect with old friends, the ones who hadn't turned their backs on me. Slowly, but surely, I started rebuilding my support system. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't fast. But with each new conversation, each small step forward, I felt a little stronger. But the hardest part of all was accepting that I might never get the closure I wanted. I would never hear Lily apologize. I would never hear Mark say that he was sorry for doubting me, for believing in something that wasn't true. I would never get the chance to explain to anyone what had really happened. And while that hurt more than I could put into words, I had to come to terms with it. Not everything is fair. Not every wound can be healed. Months passed, and eventually, I found myself in a place where the pain wasn't as all-consuming. I had moments of peace, of happiness. I had built a life for myself, a life that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. I had learned to trust myself again. I had learned to love myself again. I remember one day, standing in front of the mirror, looking at the reflection of the person who had emerged from the ashes of what had once been my life. I didn't recognize her at first. She was stronger, more resilient, but she was also scarred. And I realized then that it was okay to be scarred. It was okay to be hurt, to have moments of weakness as long as I didn't let those scars define me. And that's when I realized the true lesson of this nightmare. The pain, the betrayal, the loss. They didn't have to define my future. I was the one who got to decide who I was going to be. I wasn't going to let Lily's lies, or Mark's doubts, or anyone else's opinions shape who I became. The betrayal I had experienced had forced me to face my own fears, my own insecurities, and it had shown me just how strong I really was. I learned that even when life feels like it's falling apart, there's always a way to rebuild. You just have to have the courage to pick up the pieces, no matter how hard it may seem. And with that, I moved forward. I let go of the past, not because it didn't matter, but because I knew I couldn't live in the shadow of it forever. I forgave myself for the things I couldn't control. I let go of the anger, and I chose to live. Moral of the story: betrayal can feel like the end of the world, but it's also the beginning of a new chapter. Sometimes, the hardest things in life force us to discover our own strength. In the end, we are the ones who get to decide how our story ends. If you've ever experienced betrayal or been torn apart by someone you trusted, share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life tales of resilience and healing.